All right, good afternoon. Welcome to the CC Power, California Community Power Board meeting. I'll call this meeting to order and ask our General Counsel, Brittany Isles, to verify a meeting quorum.
I can verify that there is a quorum present, but I would just note for the record that Director Cyphers has not yet joined the call. His name is listed because we have his room, the public meeting room.
Okay, thank you. I have not received any new matters to discuss subsequent to posting the agenda. And I'll note that Director Chassett from Ava Energy has joined us. I'll now open it up for public comment. Any member of the public may address the board concerning any matter not in the agenda. Do we have any public comment? Okay, not seeing any. We'll move to the consent agenda. Board members, let's see, does any member of the board want to pull an item of consent? And if I don't see any hands up, Director Hale? Yep, we'll.
My apologies. I'm trying to get the agenda to come up. I'm not certain the item I am interested in having a little bit of discussion on is on consent or not. It is with regard to the general manager's authority to execute contracts.
Okay.
Is that a consent item or not?
It is a consent item. It's item 5B.
Thank you.
So
I would like an opportunity to discuss it. It may not modify the vote, so maybe some Q&A, and then the whole consent agenda could be taken up.
Okay.
Yeah, I think if we could just move that item off the consent agenda and then vote on the consent, and then we'll just take that up as part of the regular agenda first.
Okay, that sounds good. So we will be pulling item 5B, which is delegation of authority to the general manager to execute agreements on behalf of CC Power. Director Hale, that is the item you want to discuss. Perfect.
Yes, thank you.
Without that being on the consent calendar, could I get a motion for approval of the remaining part of the consent calendar?
I'll move.
Director Hale?
I'll second.
Director Mitchell? All right. Any comments from the public? Not seeing any. Let's take a roll call vote on this motion to approve the consent calendar.
Okay, for the consent agenda, minus item 5B, Central Coast Community Energy.
Approve.
Clean Power SF.
Approve.
East Bay Community Energy. I apologize. We will get that name change fixed.
Yes, approved.
Peninsula Clean Energy, I believe is absent. Redwood Coast Energy Authority.
Yes.
San Jose Clean Energy.
Yes.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy.
Yes.
Sonoma Clean Power Authority.
I'm sorry, I'm sitting down right now, so I will pass.
Thank you.
I'll catch up.
Valley Clean Energy.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The consent agenda passes.
Thank you. We'll now move to item 5B that was pulled from the consent calendar. Director Hale, would you like our general manager to provide you an overview, or do you have a specific question?
I actually just have a specific question, a little context and a question, if I may. I don't think I need a presentation. Okay. My interest here in pulling this from consent was just to have a bit of conversation. The item as written would appear to have no boundaries on what the general manager can do. I know as a director, I know that we have requirements on the general manager to file conflict of interest form 700, boundaries like that can help address what the public may consider some, public integrity guardrails, if you will. And I think that's important and appropriate. So I'm prepared to support the item, understanding that we have those kinds of guardrails. One request I have of the general manager to consider would be to make it a practice to report out contracts that are executed at the next general manager report on the board meeting agenda, please, so that the board members have an awareness of that activity.
Director Hale, I'll make a comment on this. Great point. I completely support what you're suggesting and be happy to make an amendment to ask for an amendment to the motion to get that direction to the general manager. I'll also say that in the resolution, it bounds the general manager's authority to establish policies and budgets. So I think we have one guardrail there, but I like your idea about more transparency so that we give the general manager the ability to move quickly, but at the same time, our oversight function would be served well if he provides that information to us at the next board meeting. I'd also be happy to work with the general manager on a format that would be satisfactory to the board.
Thank you. I was just suggesting it be a practice, but if you'd like to make it a requirement, that I'm comfortable with that as well. Thank you.
I would also support that. So I'm happy to second your motion, Girish.
Okay. Well, so we do have a motion on item 5B with an amendment to have the general manager report out to the board on contracts signed in the general manager's report, and we have a second from Director Mitchell. Any further discussion from the board?
Can I ask one question, Girish?
Please.
As I'm reading the resolution and it's tied to day-to-day operations, are there specific contracts that are excluded, like PPAs, other large capital expenses? Is the intent of the authorization to a specific dollar amount, or for just those day-to-day sort of operational components, your leasing of equipment or so forth?
I can help address that if that would be helpful. So per the JPA, all project agreements would be separate and require separate approval. So that, considering that an established CT Power board policy, those kinds of project-specific agreements would not be included in this. There's no dollar cap as the resolution is currently drafted. It would just be based on the budget and the budget categories as it is currently.
Does the board want to consider whether, no cap and no restriction puts the general manager in a position where he is interpreting the budget, making those decisions, and responsible back to the full board. That may be a position that at some point in the future, the general manager or a future general manager would be uncomfortable exercising that broader discretion. But I understand where the line is being drawn. Maybe it just puts more emphasis on the budget.
Okay, great point. Let me go to Director Chassett, followed by, I think our general manager would also like to maybe make some comments here.
Yeah, so what I'd like to do is move this item as is, but I would like to ask the general manager to come back to us at our next meeting with a proposal for, we call them sort of administrative procurement policies. that, get into more of the specifics of dollar thresholds for delegation, kinds of things and the like. So instead of, kind of giving you notes here and trying to sort of put it together, let's just come back to us with a proposal. And if you feel the need, perhaps in panel an ad hoc board committee of 2 to 3 board members who can be a sounding board. But with that, I will move the item.
And I'll second that with Nick's addition.
So we have a motion and second that was already on the table. So General Counsel, what's the procedural step now?
Yeah, so I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that second motion and second was for to move the item as is. So we can take a vote on that motion and second to move the resolution as it is. And then if it doesn't pass, revisit the motion as amended.
And maybe what I'll say is my intent, I'm okay with the initial motion. I think my intention is just, I think once we start layering one thing on, there's more that I would like to see from this policy is maybe my point. So I'm comfortable making one incremental change now. But either way, I would like our general manager to come back. And I figured, just in the abundance of not sort of creating I wasn't sure if Rob, you were going to recommend something else too, that I just wanted to avoid us sort of getting 2, 3, 4 changes when I think this is something that is best dealt with as a package. So anyway, but no strong feelings, Barb. I'm okay with your motion as well, if that is your preference.
So thank you. So just I love the intent of the discussion where it's going, and this is part of our startup nature at CC Power, where we are maturing. Alex has hired his first employee, so this is a way of giving him more flexibility. When we were talking about this, one of the things we had talked about was to ask Alex to come back in a year, right? So to revisit these delegations of authority in a year. But I think we get the intent of what's being talked about. We have a motion, which is the original motion amended to state that he will come back. If he signs a contract, he's going to report out on that. So that's the current motion and second. We're going to head to a vote, but I do see a hand up, Director Hale. Brittany, do you have a?
Yeah, if we could just get just for the record, Director Chassett, if you want to remove your motion from the table.
Why don't we? Director Hale has her hand raised, and I'm happy to remove my motion too. But Director Hale, why don't share your perspective before you?
Thank you. I think what I was hearing from Director Chassett was some additional specific authority that would be granted the general manager. I don't object to the consideration of that. I think we can act on the initial motion today and come back with what Director Chassett had sort of laid out as some scope of further work, so that the general manager will have that authority between now and when we come back. And that further refinement that Director Chassett is discussing wouldn't be a limiting factor. It would be more of a expansion. So I think I'm comfortable with acting on the initial motion, and I don't think Director Chassett's request requires a motion if we want to.
Yeah, I think let's just vote on Director Hale's motion, and I will support Director Hale's motion. I mostly was intending to not sort of layer on additional items. I'd like our general manager to think about that and come back with any additional specificity, which I think would be beneficial for all of us.
Yeah, and just for the record, it was Director Balachandran's motion given my conversation, but thank you.
All right, so we're voting on the motion that was made by yours truly, seconded by Director Mitchell. No I don't see any other hands raised, so I'm going to ask if the public has any comments on this item. I don't see any, so let's get a vote taken, Brittany.
Okay, so to approve the resolution as amended to add a requirement that the general manager report out on actions taking under this resolution. Central Coast Community Energy,
Approve.
Clean Power SF,
Yes.
East Bay Community Energy,
Yes.
Peninsula Clean Energy,
Yes.
Redwood Coast Energy Authority,
Yes.
San Jose Clean Energy,
Yes.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy,
Yes,
Sonoma Clean Power Authority,
Yes.
and Valley Clean Energy.
Yes.
Thank you. The resolution passes.
thank you all very much. We'll now move to item 6, our regular agenda. And we have our general manager is going to report out on 4 items. General Manager Morris.
Yeah, hi, CC Power Board, and thank you for the good discussion. Director Hale and Chair Balacandran, thank you for the dialogue on that motion. It's very well received and completely understandable. And I just wanted to also loop in the idea that we are planning to bring up some policies and procedures to the board to approve that will further guide and delineate decisions and how we approach things inside CC Power. So I'll take that motion. We'll get on it, and then also we'll be bringing back further policies for you to review. So appreciate everybody's consideration of that. I wanted to give a handful of updates on things happening with CC Power. We'll share some slides, but these include a quick financials update, which is really kind of early in the fiscal cycle, so not too informative, but we wanted to start getting more information to you on the financial side. We had our first event, and we'll debrief that a little bit. We have hopefully a rich discussion on the Inflation Reduction Act and possible sort of areas of interest for the CCAs. And then we have another interesting conversation to have discussion on about new membership considerations for CC Power. So with that, we'll share slides, and thank you, Amy, for sharing those. Let me just quickly start and thank our treasurer, Jeff Cyphers, who works tirelessly on behalf of the board, approving small expense reports and other things. So Jeff, thank you for your service as our treasurer. One thing that you guys know is you've passed a budget, and then we wanted to start reporting out to you more frequently on if the spending matches the plan in the budget. And so there's a bunch of financial structures we're building to bring to you, and we can jump to the next slide. So specifically, more frequent financial reporting. We'll start to have end of the year financial forecasts, so we have a reasonable expectation of where we will land at the end of the year. For those of you in projects, we also now have monthly updated project invoices or project specific monthly snapshots. So many of you recall your project dollars are yours. They're held in a balancing account. And if we use those for project dollars, the money is debited out. But we now have sort of pictures and monthly snapshots of all of the money going into and out of your project specific accounts. We also have been on the journey of reserve building this year, and then we're putting together a relatively simple dashboard to help everybody kind of get in the rhythm of being able to quickly see where we stand on these key issues for you. I'm happy to answer any questions. The next slides just give you a bit of a feel for it, so we can go to the next slide. As many of you know, we use MAR Accounting for our accounting services, and working with them, they'll be providing more updated financials. So we'll try to get in a cadence of sharing this information. And we're also going to work with our treasurer on sort of how to package it in the way that's most logical for you. There are 2 big budget categories we use, the G&A versus the project specific. These are just rack ups of that total amount in each of these 2 categories. And so if you have ideas for how to do this better, we're happy to do it. But this is sort of monthly financials you'll get directly from the accounting, and we'll try to put these in the board packet as time allows. And Amy, next slide. here's just a quick picture of the forecast in the dashboard. So, in some ways, I'm always happy to talk in details, but we also wanted to provide high level pictures and a sense of if we're on track or not for the end of the year. So what this preliminary dashboard will do is it will say what the budget was, kind of where we are on revenue and spending in those categories. And then it'll give a year-end forecast. And that forecast involves not only actual spending to date, but then plotting out what we expect our spending to be going forward. And so it's a relatively good way to build up end of year forecast that we know fits with the budget. And if not, that'll immediately become visible here. So that work is underway. And again, the year end forecast, we do have some versions of it now. But given how the dollars flow between project and G&A, we wanted to sort of make sure it was extra accurate. So we'll try to bring that to you in probably the January board meeting would be the time we roll out the full end of year forecast. And as you can see, the spending, sort of call it like a quarter to a third of what the budget amount is. And so you sort of roughly know sort of where we are in our budget cycle, which is July 1st to June 30th, that we're about a third of the way through. And so these numbers sort of spec out, but we have looked at it in more detail and can say it's on track. I'm happy to field any questions on this. Chair Balachandran or others?
This is really good. Thank you for being so responsive. And yeah, this is great. I like it.
Okay.
I don't see any other hands raised, so please go ahead with your next item.
Okay. So I feel really excited from our Getting It Built Right event. As many of you know, we wanted to have a little chance for discussion. So Amy, we can go to the next slide. And I wanted to also actually again acknowledge Director Cyphers, who played a really critical role of serving as a lead moderator for the Getting It Built Right event. And as many of you know, the purpose of this event was to hear from a lot of key groups. And we know there are really important stakeholder groups and constituents. And we wanted to get their various perspectives on what makes for a successful clean energy project. And so we really went into the shoes of key stakeholder groups. For instance, we heard from environmentalists, environmental justice. There were some ratepayer advocates, some of the local community perspectives. We heard from land use planning perspectives, from the developer perspective, from labor's perspective, and more. And so I thought it was a really interesting journey. It also highlighted that, CCAs generally have a tough job of trying to build clean energy goals at an incredible pace to achieve, goals that everybody in the room agreed were probably paramount. But then at the same time, trying to blend in all these different perspectives and definitions for success. So I thought it was a really rich opportunity to listen, and the next steps will be a November 24th comments deadline, and I've already seen one set of comments come in, and then Chair Balachandran, I was planning to package that information for any ad hoc committee as you so direct. So I wanted to hand it to you in case there was any thing you wanted to say about that, and then hopefully we could also perhaps have some discussion started by Jeff Cyphers.
Sounds good. I'll just pipe in for a little bit. So congratulations, Alex, for organizing a very effective day, and really appreciative of Director Cyphers and also Director Hale, Director Mitchell for creating this agenda and providing us the facility. So subsequent to this meeting, I wanted to announce that I am forming an ad hoc committee with Directors Mitchell and Cyphers, so we can take in the information that we gathered that day and the additional comments that we are requesting by November 24th, so we can package up some recommendations for the board's consideration. I expect our first meeting would be held sometime in December, subsequent to the 11/24 date we are proposing to get final comments in. So back to you, Alex.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to make sure we had a chance to discuss, and perhaps now you've laid out the plan, Chair Balakonda and others may have things to suggest or add. So it's a good time for discussion if people want to jump in.
Director Seifers.
Well, thanks for the kudos, and I also want to thank Alex and Lori for having the venue and organizing all the speakers. This really was a very positive event, and for anybody who missed it, I want to encourage you to read through all the comments when they do come out. I felt very renewed. I was impressed that everyone who attended agreed right from the very first minute that the energy transition is critical and needs to happen at pace. And the question wasn't whether, but how. And I think that's progress, and was very exciting for me. So I think as we go forward, I want to keep testing the waters for how we can relate to our labor and EJ allies in advocating for the hard but essential things we're going to need to fulfill that energy transition. So I look to all of you to help inform that process. I, for one, am particularly daunted about transmission, but I think you'll hear more about that in the future. And I think I'm looking forward to what comes next, and I'm carrying over some of the lessons we got from that day on November 3rd into my own territory and hosting similar kinds of events here. So if any of you are doing the same, I encourage you to kind of let us know so that we can share lessons and learn from each other. But I'll leave it there. It was a good event, and I'm looking forward to the next one.
Thank you, Director Seifers. I don't see any other hands raised. I do see Director Marshall.
I just want to echo what Jeff said and say that I received correspondence from both our former board member, Rick Bonilla, who spoke on a panel, and Dave Morrow and a couple of other folks who were there from our service territory who really appreciated the gathering just to start with, and then, you know, the discussion. So it would be great to see more of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Hale, followed by Director Sears.
Sorry, I'm having a trouble with my mouse today. I just wanted to lend my thanks to that's been expressed already. I thought it was a well-organized session. I think it's a good idea for us to think about other topics to similarly address and engage with folks. It's clear that the communities of interest that we're trying to interact with aren't coming to these meetings. So I think we need to go out to them. I'm interested to hear, Director Marshall, that you heard from folks post the meeting. I haven't heard from anyone post the meeting. I did before, so I guess I'll take silence as pleasure, consent with how that day went. And I'm very much looking forward to what the comments are that come in writing before the 24th. I know we got a lot in written comment in our prior sessions on this topic in the context of board meetings, not in the workshop, but in the context of board meetings. I'll be interested in seeing what comes in, and interested in seeing what the ad hoc committee comes up with. I do have a question for Director Morris, if I may, Chair.
Yes, that would be General Manager Morris.
I'm sorry, yes.
Yes, please.
All this formality. I'm stumbling over my formality. I'm wondering what you might have planned, if anything, for outreach to remind folks of the deadline, what you're doing to help them in terms of navigating how to execute on that invitation. You know, are they do we have like an email that they're sending it to, or are they posting it someplace? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, the instructions, great question. And I think maybe we could do an e-blast to thank all the attendees. I'm getting that list together now. So we can definitely, to your point of nudging people to comment, what I would plan to do is send a sort of follow-up thank you for attending email. And then the instructions for submitting comments, which people can submit comments anytime, but just given the timing, we're planning to try and get that ad hoc set up for at least some preliminary meeting in December. So we wanted to try and get the comments in and then the notes from the meeting published as well. So we'll have all that coming together towards the end of this month, and I'll send an email to remind people to comment, and then they can be on the lookout. And I'm also really happy to hear of the positive feedback. You know, I do think it was a good event for CC Power to help host and bring people together. So I was excited for us to play that role, and would certainly welcome other opportunities to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Sears.
Yeah, thanks. And just to echo what's already been said, but Alex, you just sort of answered my question. It seemed like a comment deadline. We were sounding like a regulatory agency more so than a public agency. So I would encourage us to be a little bit more sort of maybe not use that type of language when we're seeking comments, because it seems a little bit more formal than what we need to be. There's no regulatory requirement we're operating under here. So I would just encourage us to avoid that if we can. But I think one of my overall takeaways from the event was, one, good to hear all the voices in the room. But I was particularly struck by sort of the sobering sort of information that that CAISO and others presented to us. I think we all understand what that is, at least in these circles, but perhaps those who are encouraging us to operate in certain ways and do procurement in certain ways maybe don't have as I guess strong of a understanding of that. But it was certainly sobering for me as well to recognize what the potential is there. One thing that did not come through for me, though, and perhaps this is a conversation for another time, but that there's a goal, and then there's the ramp up to that goal. If that ramp if we can't climb that ramp in any particular sort of rational or reasonable way, that we start to have broader conversations about the goal itself and about whether there's other ways to maybe get at that sort of overall goal. This could be I don't know if this is the right forum to have those types of conversations, but it seems to me like we would perhaps provide a service to the state and the regulatory agencies to maybe vet some of those things. The last thing I would say is that while I appreciated sort of the groups that were in the room, ultimately the customer seemed to be not sort of present in the room in a very kind of specific way. So that would be something else that I would encourage us to maybe think about. We kind of serve as a proxy for the customers. I think probably the most effective voices in the state at this point in time, but keeping that in mind, I think might be useful going forward. But overall, super important, super good event. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Sears. Director Hale?
Just one other thought as we lead into this comment and invitation. And I would characterize it, to your point, Mitch, it's like we have a deadline internally, we have a work plan. So to have your comments factor into our work plan for the ad hoc committee, they should be turned in sooner rather than later. November 24-ish. The other thing I would ask of the general manager is that the presentations that were made be posted. I haven't seen them posted yet. And I think we told folks we would. So maybe including that in a link to those postings when you send out your reminder and your thank you would be helpful.
Yeah, great reminder, Director Hale. Thank you. Will do.
Great, excellent comments. Thank you. Looking to see if there's some additional comments on this topic. If not, we'll move on to your next one. And just as a note, we will be taking public comment at the end of the general manager's report. So we'll go there after he finishes the new membership consideration. But right now, back to you, Alex, for Inflation Reduction Act.
Okay, great. Well, thanks again for that discussion. So, really shifting gears here. Wanted to take you now back to our strategic plan where we developed a work plan and a budget for the year. The strategic plan included a handful of items we wanted to try and focus on this year. One of those was starting to look at and wrapping our head around the Inflation Reduction Act. And through that, sort of potentially sharing opportunity areas with you, and then we'll see where it goes from there. So we are getting close to sort of wrapping up, I would say, phase one of this project. So I wanted to give a somewhat substantive update and have some discussion with you. And also note that, the day-to-day engagement on this project is happening through the resource planning working group, and that's open to all members. So every CC Power member can sort of participate as much as they want in sort of understanding this information, deep diving it, etc. So let's just jump in really quickly. Again, this is what we call phase one work, which is pre-RFO. It's funded by G&A dollars, so it's open to all CC Power members. And the major steps were to conduct information gathering, really wrapping our head into the complexity of the Inflation Reduction Act. And this isn't just understanding the specific minutia of it, it's also understanding it in the context of market forces. What's actually happening in response to it and where are opportunities emerging? And then we would get into step two and start to overlay what do CCAs need, what might be beneficial from you with sort of the opportunity areas provided by the Inflation Reduction Act. And generally what that leads us to do is be able to formulate strategies and or recommendations, if any. And again, there may be that we don't recommend anything here, but and then we would eventually do a report out, talk to the resource planning working group, and come back to the board with any official recommendations from that working group. And the structure there is that the working group is comprised of your power supply teams who are sort of well positioned to weigh in on if there should be any official recommendation for CC Power to go to the board. So that would be the final step of this project, and that would sort of probably end phase one of the project. One idea would be that if the working group recommends we pursue an RFO, as you guys know, in our language, that means it kicks into phase two, and it's sort of where members opt in. So it's no longer open to all members. It's open only to those who opt in. Okay. Just give you a quick next slide, Amy, on the time frame. This work's been underway since July, and there's actually been a lot of work. It's been really interesting and fun. So I'm really excited to talk about the Inflation Reduction Act and relay a lot of what I've learned from various experts. The learning phase, the idea assessment phase, the specific opportunity assessment, and even as recent as November 2nd, we did have an in-person work session with a large handful of resource planning staff from your various organizations who came to listen in. And we really walked them through some of the deeper analysis of specific opportunities. One of the sort of ideas we looked at a lot was, what is this direct pay provision that municipal entities like CCAs are eligible for? Could it be beneficial for you and your ratepayers? And how do we check that? So that's really what the work session went into, was a deeper analysis of the financial modeling. And once we got into the financial modeling, it also kind of started to highlight, how would we actually do this? What would the work plan look like? And that's where we started to see these strategic benefits I'll speak to in a moment. So let's go to the next slide. So one of the big questions people ask is direct pay a good deal for municipal entities? Is that worth exploring? And there's a lot of analysis out there, but we also built our own bottoms up financial model, which we've had vetted by external experts. to check it. And what you see here, and again, this is all subject to many assumptions. So I don't want people to over analyze this, but if you have, say you have a underlying project that's roughly $100 million, you could finance that through a normal PPA, or you could try to finance it through a build, own, transfer project. If you own it as a municipal entity, you can get the direct pay. So we really wanted to compare what the end cost of such a project would be under these different financial paths. And what this shows is that you might, under certain assumptions, gain a 7% savings through the build own transfer ownership model with direct pay, as opposed to a PPA. And again, this is not based on execution ability. This is just based on the financial pathway you take, which shows up in the ownership model, PPA versus BOT. We also know that many CCAs use prepays on RPS eligible resources, and the prepay does still appear to be a beneficial path with potentially 3% savings, better than a BOT. But this model really does start to highlight sort of all these assumptions that go into it and really where you might land. What it doesn't do a great job at is assessing risks. So we did run some sensitivity analysis through the model. It's very easy for doing that. And we can see that if we have domestic content provisions that make our project more expensive than the otherwise underlying project, what does that do? And so we ran a bunch of that, and we're still socializing that with the resource planners. But for purposes here, I wanted to give you at least this one picture, and I want everyone to take it with a grain of salt. But there, under the right circumstances, there could be 7% savings or thereabouts. And a lot of this ultimately is a modeling exercise, and where we would really learn definitively what the savings could be is through a competitive solicitation process. And until then, we're using kind of model-based speculation and market reports to assess it rather than actual bid data from developers. Next slide, please. And, so when we looked at the build own transfer, it took us on an interesting journey. What does it look like to be an entity that, is the owner through a build own transfer agreement? And we've talked to a lot of folks, and the model is not, it's not radical. This is a model used frequently, and also used frequently by municipal entities. And so to actually become the owner through a BOT, there's some journeys and steps you take. And the end result, though, is that you have these strategic benefits. Now, we did not quantify these strategic benefits, but we're pretty confident in general they're non-zero benefits, so they're valuable, but we haven't embedded them in our analysis. And these benefits would be a significant step in credit and financial strengthening. And this would be because the debt issued to get into a build own transfer is different than PPA debt. It's viewed differently from Wall Street and financial groups. And if we do a joint solicitation project, we've sized out that we could, in fact, issue this debt. It would show up on the CCA's books, but it would not necessarily harm the credit rating. And there's some strategies for how you do that. And then once you have this stronger credit record and you actually have debt on your balance sheet, my understanding is that over time improves your credit ability for future opportunities, whatever they may be. We also think we would be flexing the muscle to project manage ownership of a project. This would give optionality to do further build own transfer deals. It's hard to jump right into a really big one and complicated one. So one idea would be to start with a relatively smaller or easier technology so that it's easy the first time around. You're building those skills. Very valuable is the end of project value. So at the end of the project's life, which can be 15 to 20 years on a PPA, you own the site, you own the real estate, you may own the interconnection. And so that is certainly valuable. We also know that there may just be value in having a market that doesn't just go through PPAs. And so sort of adding diversity to the market and hedging away from the PPA only market structure. And then lastly, and this also is an emerging market trend, there may be challenges in the tax equity market for a couple reasons. And so those challenges would create headwinds on PPAs that would not create headwinds on build own transfer. So another sort of possible strategic benefit here is avoiding a market segment that may face some headwinds due to liquidity or other issues that are certainly outside of California's control and are major like national or international trends, including having to do with international banking standards. And so those are some of the sort of that last strategic benefit would be to perhaps avoid some of those headwinds that again are really hard to predict, but may be coming to the market. For what it's worth, also in looking at somewhat similarly situated organizations to CC Power, those being SCAPA and NCPA, we do understand both are considering direct pay projects. And we also understand that, you know, hospitals and other nonprofits may be eligible to pursue direct pay and so we have heard that there's sort of an uptick in looking at build own transfers and looking by the right entities to get into a BOT and a direct pay capture position. Let me just go to the findings on the last one. So just to recap, there's definitely benefits available from the Inflation Reduction Act, and it is a really big deal. And for purposes of a build own transfer and direct pay, you know, we saw two types of benefits. One is the cost savings benefit, that 7%. Type 2 would be the strategic benefits, these sort of potentially significant non-zero dollar benefits, but we haven't tried to compute them. And I think specifically the credit strengthening is one that is really for you guys and your CFOs and COOs to think about, you know, what's your credit journey, what's the right fit, where are you going, and at what point does having debt on your books help you in that way. So we looked at that, and then we think that, and this is preliminary, and I will ultimately want to get a sort of official recommendation from the Resource Planning Working Group, which is again your staff, but the way forward, if you want, would be to maybe further explore this through a joint RFP. Now that joint RFP is really just getting the validity of the pricing and the option to go into a deal. It's not signing a deal. So really it's sort of validating the hypothesis here, and would also build I think a fair bit of the work on the debt issuance, which by all accounts is a significant step for this first time. So those would be the next steps. We'll be kind of getting down the road on this to get pricing and then deciding what everybody wants to do. And you know, one other key thing is the solicitation would validate if parties would come to us with a willingness to be partners on a BOT project. We have been chatting with a lot of developers. We have, I'd say, a fair bit of anecdotal data and, you know, from developers that they're interested in it. On November 29th for the Resource Planning Working Group, we're also going to sort of invite some developers in to talk not just to the team on this, but to the larger Resource Planning Working Group about their interest or not in partnering with CCAs and CC Power on a build own transfer agreement. So with that in mind, what we might do is check in with members, update the Resource Planning Working Group again in December, and perhaps by then we might be ready to come back to the board with some official recommendation from the Resource Planning Working Group. And I know December can be a tricky month, so there's also a chance we need to do further diligence or the schedule slips, but I'm very open to feedback on what timing might work for everybody. And again, as it says at the top, we've really tried to use the Resource Planning Working Group as kind of the main client here, making sure that they're feeling comfortable in driving this project while still achieving the board's goals.
All right.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Chair Balacandra, and I'm happy to field questions or dialogue further.
Yeah, the substantial presentation. Thank you very much. from SVCE's perspective, just do appreciate how you have convened the group, Alex. I think there've been you had the webinar, a whole very good discussion. I'd say that from an SVC perspective, we are very interested in moving this forward. I think further discussion with the resource planning working group on the issues that you have identified is warranted. So I'd look forward to that, the meetings that you're going to be having with them shortly after Thanksgiving. So let me, I'll call on Director Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks, Alex. I'm also really supportive of this work. Thank you for all the work that's gone before. And, this is something that we're very interested in participating in, and I think a really great fit for CC Power. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Chairman.
Director Cyphers.
Well, I'll echo those thanks and just kind of underline that this is valuable even if we don't foresee an obvious immediate application. I need to understand this mechanism for my own CCA, and I think others, I hope, are in a similar situation where if we understand the option, that alone is valuable. So I just want to kind of emphasize the financial value from my perspective of knowing when we can do this and when we should and when we shouldn't, and getting more intelligent. So I'll leave it there.
Well said, Director Cyphers. Agree with you. Other comments for our general manager on this topic?
I'll chime in from PCE to say we are also very interested. We have a core group of board leadership that's interested in the overall topic of ownership and how it's structured under direct pay. So this is pretty much slides right into that. And I think it, to your point, Jeff, about options, we would like to engage in it and then perhaps invite you to come and present at the appropriate time.
Great. Yeah.
Thank you, Director Marshall. I don't see any other hands up, so General Manager, feel free to go on to your next topic.
Okay. All right. So we'll see if we end up reporting back in December on the Inflation Reduction Act. And again, I want to emphasize that all of your staff have been very engaged, and it's been great to work with such smart, engaged people, asking tough questions and really helping us, grind the analysis forward. And this is also a chance for me to recognize Philippe Gerritsen, who's the CC Power Director of Origination. He's not on today's panel, but he's listening in, and he joined us in a timely way to really help a lot with this project, and has been in the role of negotiating and working with developers. So really that ability to get real information from the development community has been aided significantly by Philippe's contribution. So thanks, Philippe, if you're out there. Okay. So up next, we have another, what I think, really fun conversation to me. And this is about membership. So first I wanted to thank you, Chair Balachandran. You and I've had a chance to dialogue on this. We've had a chance to loop in some others. It's an interesting one and something that we should think about. It also has legal implications because the membership rules are stipulated in the JPA agreement. So I wanted to, thank our general counsel, Brittany Isles, who's also helped a lot of sort of understanding our options here. But what I wanted to tee up today was a discussion on a possible pathway for consideration. And right now, we don't really have even a mechanism or a protocol for how we respond to new membership inquiries. And so we want to at least fix that while still complying with the JPA. And so what I'll lay out here is a draft potential process we might agree to that could be brought back to the board and approved. And it would very clearly sort of help us navigate these things and perhaps give the board the right information by which it would want to make a decision or not. Again, assume all of this is draft, and I do hope we have some discussion. So just to level set, the current rules and in the JPA, and there's no plan for changing this, is new members must be approved by a 2/3 vote of the board. And the joining agency would agree to pay a share of costs of the organization as determined by the board to be appropriate. So as we look at the future and the volume of procurement CCAs may need to do, or the interests of other CCAs to join, we thought it would be prudent to tee this up for you. And so where we landed through some iterative work was a 3-step process that we could adopt if you want down the road. The process would be someone approaches us and is interested in membership, we could form a committee and a staff review. That committee and staff review, and I talk about this a little more on the next slide, can come to a recommendation that would go to the board. There would also be step 2, some work to determine this new member initial fee. What's a fair and appropriate amount for a new member to pay? There's no language on that in JPA document, so we might want to build out sort of our methodology for that. And then lastly, the step 3 is it's approval vote by the board. Sorry, there's a small typo there. The approval vote by the board is always contingent that the prospective member also have a resolution to join passed by their own board, but I didn't include that detail here. But so know that the approval process in step 3 would also require the interested member to have their own resolution passed by their board. So next slide. So just wanted to detail a little bit more on step 1 in these details. If we had a new member and we did step 1, which is to form a committee, that committee could do a few things. One is they could sort of do some diligence efforts to inform their recommendation. And then also they could be guided by principals. We thought principals might be a smart tool here for ensuring we evaluate prospective members fairly and consistently and in ways that the board approves, so that by the time recommendation comes forward, you kind of know that the underlying process has been governed by things that you think make sense. Some of the principles we've looked at as draft here. Principle 1 would be open, transparent, and available. So, and this has been really fun. I've also talked to NCPA and SCAPA about how they approach membership and, what some of the sort of good practices are. And, really just being able to work collaboratively and transparently in good faith with members, having an eyes wide open relationship is really important. And having a responsive member is important too. And so that's what happens with Principle 1 is sort of trying to look at it from that lens. Principle 2 is mission aligned, and that really speaks to not only pro CCA, but also perhaps like alignment on the energy portfolio that's desired through joining CC Power. So there's a couple ways we could look at mission aligned. And then lastly, we wanted to recognize that the existing CC Power members, have paid for and organized and put a lot of time into this. And so we wanted to make sure any new member is beneficial to existing members. There's a lot of ways you could look at that. It could be reputational, it could be size, it could be geography, it could be resource interest. So there's a lot of ways, but as a principle, it does seem to fit. And then just also on the diligence phase, as you know, many CCAs do a good job of posting information about the organization, their board, their financial health, but we would sort of use this diligence process as a chance to work with the prospective CCA and make sure that not only were we able to get information and collaborate effectively with them, but we would be gathering information that perhaps could be meaningful for any recommendation to the board. So that's what would happen with step 1. I've not fleshed out any recommendations yet on step 2, which is sort of the cost determination, but we thought this would be a good place to allow for some socialization and discussion at the board level today. So with that, Chair Balakhandran, I'd love to open it up for discussion and get any input or feedback.
Yeah, while I'm waiting for hands to be raised, I'll just have some opening comments. Thank you for putting together the structure as a new joint powers agency while just forming our value and some of the things that you're doing today with IRA and shared services, etc. I like the principles that you've laid out and both the strategic value and risks. So I'll open it up for comments, and Director Cyphers.
Yeah, I like this framework, and in part I like it because it allows both it allows flexibility and it requires attention. Like, we have to care about an application for a new member. And I don't think we can know in advance everything we need to discuss, for example. So I think having it remain somewhat at this kind of level of detail is smart. I think one thing that I would encourage us to think about, that is in addition to a new member being beneficial to the existing membership, is the principle that we're also advancing the concept of community-owned power more generally in California. And I think a new member application should be thought of maybe in both perspectives. Is this supportive of the existing members and our aspirations for solving the climate crisis and delivering reliability and so forth? And also, is it supportive of California's efforts to support community-owned power? I think that could be a general add-on that we might want to consider. But I don't know that this needs amending. I just wanted to offer that for the discussion.
Looking for other comments here, and Director Hale.
Thank you. I appreciate everyone's patience while I'm having trouble with my mouse. First I need a reminder. Do our bylaws say you have to be a CCA to be a member of CC Power?
No, it's a CCA or any public agency. And I will say the JPA also contemplates additional requirements for a public agency that is not a CCA. So there can be different policies.
Okay. So we're already staying in the universe of public agency. Okay, good. Yeah, I think what you've laid out here makes a lot of sense, General Manager Morris, and I like Director Cypher's ads there. I think we're going in a good direction here, and I think it's prudent to plan ahead, right? When we're not like pressed with a request. Thank you.
I'll add some comments, and I think Director Cyphers talked about a dynamic tension, so I'll talk about the other end of the spectrum of what he was talking about, and it has to do with financial risks and credit quality of our members. We each can do things on our own based on our credit quality, but when we come in jointly, our interests and our value gets determined by our partners too. So on the one hand, at CC Power, when we were forming it, the JPA talks, it's joint procurement, economies of scale. But the flip side of that too is there are risks. There are step-up provisions we have in our joint purchasing agreements. And so we're supporting each other on that, and that's risks that we are taking. So that's something that's of great interest to me, to make sure that that dynamic tension of expanding public power, etc., but at the same time making sure that we are also effective in getting good pricing for joint procurement. So, and I think that's laid out. And as we're starting here, we don't want to, put too many constraints on ourselves. So I think the principles you've laid out allow for this discussion and dynamic tension. So thank you very much. While I was talking, I was looking for other hands. I don't see other hands raised. Is Director Hale, I think, may have a mouse? No, you're good? All right. So let me open it up for public comment on the General Manager's updates. I'm not seeing any public comment, so let me bring it back here and maybe ask board members if there are any other comments you want to make in general on the general manager's report before we go to the next item. Not seeing any raised hands, we'll go to item number 6B. And we have one slide on this. I'll be speaking to the slide. So as a board, one of our duties is not just to hire the general manager and set a vision, but to also conduct the general manager's performance review. The general manager's contract is public information. So I'll just say that when we hired the general manager, we said that at the end of the first year, we'll set goals. We also have a bonus payment that will be provided to him. I believe it's in December of this year. So the performance appraisal itself was expected to be done for next year. And this year we were just the beginning of 2024, we'll set his goals. But in talking to a couple of folks here, the vice chair also, we thought it'd be a good idea to have a very high level survey of the board so we can provide the general manager some high level feedback on his performance. To that end, Director Mitchell has agreed to administer a survey that will be provided to the board in December. So that's something that you can expect in December. And as far as 2024 goes, we'll start with a goal setting process, a mid-year check-in, and an end-of-year performance review. General Manager Morris has been quite proactive in providing me some templates on what we can use for that. So I think we are in good stead. And the main purpose of today's update on this item was to inform the board of what was coming up, and then, of course, invite any comments on this process. Before I take it to the board for comments, I'd like to ask our general manager if he has any comments to add to this.
Thanks, Chair Balakander. No, I mean, I really appreciate the chance to get feedback. I like it. So, I'm looking to have a really engaged performance review, and this is my first year, so I'm assuming there's room for improvement, and would welcome the feedback, and certainly for next year, getting the goals dialed up, and then matching our work plan and attack plan to that is something I'll take very seriously. So thank you.
So let me see if there are any hands raised. I'm not seeing any. I want to thank Director Mitchell for volunteering to create the survey and administer it. Thank you very much. So with that, let's see if there's any public comment on this. Though there's no action, let's ask if there's any public comment. I don't see any. So let's go to item 6C, approval of a shared services resource adequacy report. General Manager Morris.
Okay. Again, this is a year of getting things started, building capability. So, what I was trying to explain CC Power to someone, and they said, "Oh, so you're kind of like the Costco. You're like a Costco. You just like help. You buy bigger packages of things." And I said, "Well, it's not a totally bad metaphor." And this is actually an example of that. This is sort of a bulk buy project that I'm requesting the board consider. What this is that, working with the resource planning working groups, many of you need information. And there's a lot of ways where CC Power might play a role in bulk buy or sort of buying down the cost of some of these matters. In this case, what we're looking at is a relatively narrow topic. It's sort of this resource adequacy report concept. So many of you, for your power supply teams, want information that helps you. They can use resource adequacy information for various purposes, including their portfolio planning, portfolio mark to market, looking at how their resources fit with the upcoming slice of day rules for resource adequacy. And so in light of that, we have an opportunity to purchase a report at a discount if we get it in bulk. And so that's what we are proposing for everybody. This again would be only for interested parties. And sort of the pre-negotiated price does appear to be 10% or more of a discount. And so if we have more parties, it just brings the cost down as well. So that's what's contemplated here. And I'm happy to answer any questions. When we went and put the board packet out, we didn't have sort of a fully negotiated deal. We wanted to make sure that we structured the motion and resolution such that I had room to negotiate on the members' behalf, but to make sure it was contained, we put a not to exceed limit in the resolution so that you guys have a feel for it. And then with the board's approval, it would still be on the members to opt in and then, bear the costs if they want.
Thank you very much, General Manager Morris. I have a question for you before we get to Director Hale, followed by Director Cyphers. You do reference that you would bill those members who are interested through projects. How do you anticipate allocating the cost? Do you have an idea yet?
I do. So specifically, one of the potential options that I plan to pursue here would be there's a fixed cost, and then we can share it with every member who wants at that point. So if more members want, it just buys down the cost. And this RA report, if we go with the vendor, we have pre-targeted. You also get a 1-hour meeting with them to talk through resource adequacy, slice of day, and other rules. So there's a couple other bells and whistles that go along with it. But fundamentally, this is a report that provides your team with a 10-year look ahead on RA prices and forecasts that may be valuable for your team to use. Again, it's just one forecast. So there are other information services that do that. But we know that this one we have in mind is a strong analytical team and something we think the members would be interested in.
Thank you, Director Hale.
Thank you. I support the concept. I think the market intelligence is always helpful. I'm interested in having sort of to our chair's comment, better understanding of the cost share. And I know that in order for us to make a payment, we need documentation that shows the cost share for our invoicing system. So something simple, not like the big project cost share agreements, but something that's simple once you know who's in and how much we're doing, that lays it out for all of us so we see who's paying what, and then I can use that to get a check out to you.
Fantastic. And for what it's worth, Director Hale, I have connected with Brittany, our general counsel, on sort of how to document this in ways that we think accommodate the CCA's approval processes. So she's well aware of that, and we have a plan already. Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Cyphers.
Thank you. I think this is responsive in at least two ways. One is it's responsive to the fact that RA is an increasing cost share of our entire expenses and will likely continue to be so for the foreseeable future. So I think in that way, it's very responsive. I think in another way, I'm very glad that when I connected with my procurement team, they had already been well briefed on this and had a very strong opinion about it and were very supportive, which means you did your homework. So I appreciate that you've reached out to our teams and we're responsive in that regard too. So I support this and would move the item.
Thank you. Director Mitchell.
Yeah, so I'll second the item. And again, just thank you for bringing this forward. I think this is the type of thing that it's great to see with CC Power. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
Looking for other hands. We do have a motion and a second. Any discussion by the board? Let me go to public comment, not seeing any hands raised for discussion. No public comment, so let me bring it back. There's a motion and second. So let's take a vote on this.
Okay, for resolution 23-1104, Central Coast Community Energy,
Approved.
Clean Power SF,
Yes,
East Bay Community Energy,
Yes.
Peninsula Clean Energy,
Yes.
Redwood Coast Energy Authority,
Yes.
San Jose Clean Energy,
Yes.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy,
Yes.
Sonoma Clean Power Authority,
Yes.
and Valley Clean Energy.
Yes.
Thank you. The resolution passes.
Thank you very much. We'll now move to item 7, discussion of any individual member items. I'll start off by saying that it's public knowledge. I'll be retiring as of the end of March. Very, very happy to announce that our SVC board has selected Monica Padilla to be the next CEO of Silicon Valley Clean Energy. She will be coming onto the board starting in April. She is on the listening side of this meeting and obviously very involved in CC Power prior to it being formed too. Also, another item, maybe I'll just flag, it's not an individual member item, it's more for CC Power. We'll be having elections coming up. So I think it's going to be December or January. But anyway, keep that in mind as far as if you want to be an office holder here, please be prepared to express your interest when that comes up at the future board meeting. I'll now ask, okay, Director Marshall.
I have a different item, so if others want to comment on your retirement, we should maybe do that.
No. Yeah, please. You're free to say whatever you want, but I prefer you don't say anything at this meeting. Prepare your roast remarks for the appropriate time, please.
Okay, well, I'll start just by saying congratulations and good call on Monica. And then the item that I wanted to request or ask about is whether or not, as part of these board meetings, we can get report outs from your working group meetings. As you noted, a number of our staff are involved in, very technical and meaty issues on behalf of CC Power that sometimes result in, significant impacts or actions. So if it's appropriate, it would be great to also include sort of a summary of what happens at that level. Thank you.
Director Marshall, I'll take that as an item that I'll work with our general counsel and general manager on. I know that we have kind of talked about it, but we'll take this as an action item and get back to you. All right, I don't see any other hands raised, so we will adjourn the meeting at 2:18 p.m. Thank you very much.